Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for watching. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I made this Jack Skellington themed cake from The Nightmare Before Christmas, so let's get right into it. I'm starting out with a 7-inch round cake and I'm going to be filling that with some vanilla buttercream. I'm using my small offset spatula to make sure that my buttercream stays nice and even, and for the next layer I'm adding a 8-inch round vanilla cake. I'm just alternating the flavors to mix it up a bit. I'm adding another 8-inch round of my vanilla cake, and this is going to be the bottom of my cake, but because I need to carve it a bit, I'm going to flip it over. I have a picture that I'm going off of and I will link the one that I used below. So what I'm doing with my serrated knife is carving away that gap so that it's just a smooth transition from the chocolate down to the vanilla. You can also see that on 2 of those sides I carved them a little bit more because this is going to be the front and the back of my Jack bust. Once I was done, this was the shape that I ended up with. Now I'm going to carefully flip it back over and add another layer of my 7-inch chocolate cake. It wasn't quite as tall as I needed it to be, so I added another 6-inch round of some vanilla cake. So now I'm going to continue carving, and the general shape that I'm going for is Jack's shoulders and then tapering down to his waist. So I'm kind of narrowing the bit where his neck is going to be at the top and then just moving my way down. I'm going to make sure that I'm not carving too much of the 8-inch round vanilla cakes that are on the sides. I want that to be where his shoulders are going to come to a point and then it's going to taper in. And then for the front and the back, I'm keeping those a little bit rounded but not too much. Jack is a skeleton, so he's not going to be super voluptuous. It's a bit of an odd shape to kind of describe, but hopefully from watching me and also looking at the reference photo that I used, you can see what I was going for. So this is the bust done. Hopefully you can get a good look at what I ended up with. Now I'm going to crumb coat my cake, so I'm adding a thin layer of my buttercream all around the outside of the cake using my small offset spatula to lock in all of those crumbs, and then I'm going to pop that into the fridge for about 25 minutes so it can chill and set up. Once you can touch your finger to the buttercream and none of it comes off, it's ready for the final ice, so I'm applying a thick layer of buttercream all around my cake, and then using my small offset spatula and a piece of cardstock, I'm just going around and trying to get it as smooth as possible. That's going back in the fridge to chill, and now I'm going to start on my fondant. I have some black here that I'm rolling out on my cornstarch surface to about 1/8 of an inch thick, and then I'm picking that up with my fondant roller and draping it over my chilled cake, and quickly using my hands I'm just pushing all the air out from the top and just working my way down, pulling out all the pleats and the little divots in the skirt, smoothing down until I reach the bottom. Once it was covered, I went over the whole thing with my fondant smoother, and then at the bottom I just used my fondant smoother to kind of push that fondant in to create a really solid seam between the board and the cake, and then I cut away the excess using my pizza cutter. To make Jack's head, I'm going to use Rice Krispies versus cake or just a big old ball of fondant because I want it to be as light as possible, and Rice Krispies are going to do that for me. So I am dumping a bunch of little mini marshmallows into a bowl, and then I'm going to add a little bit of water to that, mix it all up, and melt those down for 30 seconds at a time in the microwave. Once those have melted down, I'm dumping in some Rice Krispies. I'm not following a recipe here, so you may want to look up a legit Rice Krispie recipe. And I'm mixing that together until it's nice and sticky. I let that cool down for about 15 minutes before I tried to work with it, and then I rubbed shortening all over my hands to keep it from sticking and started to make a ball. If you look at Jack's head, it's not perfectly round, it's like a little bit pointed, so I was going for that general shape. I ended up with this, so it wasn't super rounded on the front or the back. It kind of has a little bit of a taper at the top. I let this sit overnight so that it really firmed up before I tried to add any of the features on it. I need to give Jack's face a little more dimension, so using some fondant, I'm adding in the nose as well as like the eye socket brow bone situation going on. Again, I'm just using the reference photo that I have. Jack has a ton of expressions, so you could do whatever you wanted. I'm going for like a maniacal smirk. I'm just making sure that I blend out the edges of that fondant into the Rice Krispies so that when I cover the whole thing, you're not going to see all the lines of where the Rice Krispie stops and the fondant starts. This is what I ended up with. Please ignore the green fondant. I made the silly mistake of draping some green fondant over the face just to see how it looked, and when I peeled it away, it was left behind, so ignore that. But you can also see that I used my thumbs just to press in where his eye sockets were, just so they weren't flush with the rest of the face. I wanted them to be sunken in a bit. When my features were done, I needed to add a crumb coat to this, so I used my small offset spatula and I went over the entire thing and really pushed that buttercream into all the nooks and crannies. Rice Krispies are definitely not smooth, so I ended up doing 3 layers of buttercream on this just so it was lump and bump free. So after each layer, I just put it in the fridge, brought it out, another layer, fridge, another layer. So when it was done, I had clean hands that were a bit damp, and I ran them over the entire thing. This is the easiest way to get a thing like this really smooth. This spatula is not going to do it, so just make sure that your hands are like a little bit warm, and then I went over the whole thing until it was as smooth as it could possibly be. Next up is fondant, so I'm rolling out some white on my cornstarch surface and I'm draping that over my face and then just doing my best to smooth into all the nooks and crannies. I cut away the excess at the bottom, and it didn't film this part for some reason, but I left a little bit of a gap there, you can see, because I needed to wrap that fondant around the back of my head and make it meet as best I could. There's definitely some seams. Unless you're using modeling chocolate, it's kind of unavoidable. Just do the best you can to get them as smooth as possible. You might find that there's some air trapped, like where the eye sockets are. Don't worry, you can just use a pin to puncture that spot and then just use your fingers to guide the air out. To define his features even more, I grabbed a little piece of scrap fondant that I rubbed in some cornstarch to keep it from sticking, and I went over all of his features, the eye socket, the brow bone, around the nose, and then just using my fingers, I furrowed the brow a little bit more and just tried to define some areas. I grabbed my fondant tool and just marked in the lines around his brow to make it look like he's kind of like, I used my reference photo to gauge the shape of his eyes and rolled out some black fondant and then just cut that out using my X-Acto knife. I just eyeballed this. I'm sure you can make a stencil for yourself if you needed one, and then place that right into the eye socket, making sure the tip, like where his eye kind of points, meets the beginning of that little brow furrow. For his nostrils, I rolled out 2 balls of black fondant into this teardrop shape and then just pressed those on using a little bit of water. To make his mouth, I used my fondant tool to trace out where I wanted the line to sit, and then I also sketched in all the little stitch marks. I used some black color dust with my fine tip paintbrush and I dusted that into all the nooks and crannies of his mouth, making sure that the color was really concentrated and black. If you find that it's a little bit messy, you can just clean it up using some slightly damp Q-tips. To attach Jack's head to his body, I'm using this wooden dowel that I picked up from my local cake supply store, and I just marked off where I want it to sit and pushed that in. Before I do add the head, I need to make some of the elements of Jack's suit. So first I'm rolling out some black fondant that I added a little bit of Tylose powder to, and I'm going to cut out his baddie bow tie. I will link the stencil that I used below, and I need this to sit overnight before I try to attach it to my cake. I rolled out more of my white fondant, and then using my X-Acto knife, I cut out this domey type shape, and I attached that to the front of my cake, just making sure that the top of it reached where the dowel was sitting and the bottom went all the way down. And then using my X-Acto knife again, I just tapered the bottom down a bit so it wasn't so square looking. The dowel is going to act as his neck, so I need to cover that in fondant. I'm just wrapping around some white and then cutting a seam at the back. Before I add the head, I want to make sure that it's going to be really secure, so I added a little bit of melted chocolate to the top, because when that dries, it's just going to act as like really strong glue to keep my head from wobbling around. You can see that I already have a hole in the bottom of my head. I just marked the size out with the dowel and then cut away the Rice Krispies using a knife. I just placed that right onto my dowel and push down. If you find that when you place it down and it meets that white of the neck, if the neck looks really long, you can just trim away some of that white and then just push the head down even further, just being careful that you're not pushing the dowel all the way through. So this is what he looked like. Now I need to add the lapels, I think they're called lapels, of his suit. So I've rolled out a long strip of black fondant and I'm going to wrap that all the way around. Once I had smoothed it against my face, I used my reference photo as a guide to cut out the little notches in the side and also just tapered down the ends because they're not super wide. I know this is kind of tricky to see because it's black on black, but hopefully you can get an idea of the shape that I ended up with. For the stripes on his suit, I ended up using some white food coloring with my paintbrush and just painting them on. I thought this looked a little more realistic versus just using white pieces of fondant, but whatever you want to do is fine. On the actual lapels of a suit, the stripes are more horizontally, and then for the actual suit itself, I did vertical stripes. I found the easiest thing to do was just to go over them once and trace out all the lines, and then once you had everything laid down, just go over them again with the white to make them look more concentrated and pronounced. To make the bat head for his bow tie, I rolled out a ball of black fondant and then I cut out the ears and just tapered the bottom down into more of a point. I added the bow tie to Jack using some piping gel, and you really want to make sure that you've left it long enough so that it's really firm, it doesn't bend. Because it's so long, it will snap if you aren't careful, so just be delicate with this piece. I added the bat head to the center of that, and then using more of my white food coloring, I marked in the lines on the bow tie as well as the eyes of the bat. And this was the final result, guys. I'm really pleased with how he turned out. It's definitely one of the trickier cakes I've done, but I absolutely love The Night Before Christmas, so I wanted to make another cake this year. I have done a different Night Before Christmas themed cake on my channel, and I will link that one below if you want to check it out. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see all of the Halloween tutorials I have coming your way.